Nearly all PhD products are field repairable, increasing the total life value of the products and your investment. This video shows the disassembly and rebuild of the Series GRR Guardian High Capacity Pneumatic Parallel Grippers Design 2 in easy to follow steps. No special tools are required. Warning: all air pressure in the unit must be relieved prior to disassembly of the gripper. Caution: take care to avoid impacting the piston rod during disassembly and reassembly. Do not scratch the bearing or sealing surfaces, and note the location and orientation of seals during disassembly. Before we begin the general disassembly, if your Series GRR Design 2 gripper contains any of the following options, these must be disassembled first. First, remove the fasteners retaining the jaw position sensor. Next, remove the sensor from the unit if applicable. Finally, remove the seal or spring. Start by removing the fasteners and travel adjustment collars on open, if applicable. Measure and record location of adjustment collars. The collars may be removed on close if desired. Loosen the set screws in the travel limiting tubes on open, if applicable. The set screws may be loosened on close if desired. Make sure to note the location of each tube for reassembly. Begin by removing the fasteners and the end plates. Repeat steps for opposite side. Extend the end plates and move the jaw assemblies to the full open position. Next, remove the rack fastener from the jaw assembly. Remove the jaw assembly and end plates from the jaw guides. For models GRR22, note the orientation of the communication plugs and O-ring seals when removing the jaw assemblies. This will be important for reassembly. Next, the jaw guides may be removed from the center plate assembly. If the racks and pinion are going to be re-lubricated, pull the racks from the center plate assembly. Loosen the fasteners retaining the center plate assembly to the base plate. Remove the fasteners and seals. Separate the center plate assembly from the base plate. The bearings and pinion in the center plate assembly may be removed as well. Note the orientation. With the piston rod retracted into the jaw, remove the fasteners retaining the jaw center cover and seal. Remove the jaw center cover and seal. While retaining the end plates to prevent rotation, use the spanner tool to rotate the piston counterclockwise until it is loose. The piston rod may stay attached to either piston or end plate. Next, pull the end plates away from the jaw. Remove the remaining fasteners and remove the jaw end cover. Now remove the piston from the jaw assembly. Repeat steps for the other jaw assembly. Before we begin, here are a few notes to keep in mind. Number 1, be careful to avoid damaging the seals during reassembly. 2, follow PhD's lubrication guidelines by only using lubricants compatible with pneumatic devices. They are: only use petroleum-based lubricants or grease on the piston, piston rod, piston bore, and all seals on a GRR 12 unit. Only use petroleum-based high-pressure grease for racks, pinions, and rack spacers and bearing bores in jaws. Always use a removable thread locker on all threaded fasteners. The following table lists the assembly item number, the part description, and the specific torque for each item. Pause the video now to review. Lubricate and install the seals on the piston rod. Now install the O-ring and rod seal into the seal retainer. Remember, the O-ring is the smaller of the two larger O-rings supplied in the kit. Next, push the wear ring into the groove around the piston until it snaps in place. You will now install the piston seals into the grooves on either side of the piston wear ring. Lubricate the internal and external seal grooves of the seal retainer. Now lubricate the outside diameter of the piston rod and make sure to not apply a lubricant to the threads. Slide the seal retainer over the piston rod with the boss of the retainer facing the end plate. Apply the thread locker to the threads at the end of the piston rod. Thread the piston onto the piston rod until it's seated. Remember to not torque at this time. You will now lubricate the piston bore, the counter bore in the jaw, and the piston and seals. Now insert the piston into the counterboard end of the piston bore. Slide the seal retainer against the piston and press on the seal retainer until the piston slides into the bore and the seal retainer enters into the counterbore of the jaw. The outer face of the seal retainer should be flush with the jaw surface. Next, lubricate and insert the rod wipers into the jaw counterbores. Snap the rod wipers into the undercut groove and then verify that the wipers are completely seated. Apply thread locker to the threaded holes located in the jaw. Place the jaw end cover over the piston rod with the countersinks facing away from the piston. Install and torque the fasteners as specified in the assembly torques table. Repeat steps for the other jaw assembly. Lubricate and install the seals on the piston rod. Apply the thread locker to the piston rod threads. Hand tighten the end plate onto the piston rod until it is seated. Remember to not torque at this time. Retract the piston rod and end plate. Repeat steps for the other jaw assembly. To tighten the piston, secure the end plate so it cannot rotate. Use a spanner tool to torque the piston as specified in the assembly torques table. Heavily lubricate the 3 bearing bores in the jaw using high pressure grease. Next, lubricate and insert the rod wipers into the jaw counterbores. Lubricate and install the O-ring into the seal groove of the jaw. Remember that the O-ring is the larger diameter of the 2 large O-rings in the kit. Apply thread locker to the threaded holes located in the jaw. Place the jaw center cover on the end of the jaw, and install and torque the fasteners as specified in the assembly torques table. Repeat steps for the other jaw assembly. Curl and insert the rack wear ring into the groove in the jaw. Verify that the ring is seated completely in the groove. Next, insert the bearings and the pinion into the center plate assembly. Install the O-ring into the counter bore at the end of the pinion. Heavily lubricate the rack tubes and the pinion cavity in the center plate assembly. Insert the racks simultaneously through the rack tube and center plate assembly. Verify that both racks protrude equal distances from the center plate. If they do not, the unit will not function properly. Leave the racks in the open position. Lightly lubricate and install the seal in the counter bore of the base plate. Using dowel pins to align, place the center plate assembly on the base plate. Apply the thread locker to the fasteners. Install the fasteners through the base plate and torque them into the center plate as shown here. Torque the fasteners as specified in the assembly torques table. Heavily lubricate the ID of the long rack cover and place the counter bore in the center plate around the rack. Install the jaw guides through the center plate assembly. Slide the jaws onto the jaw guides. Wipe away any excess lubricant. Lubricate the outside diameter of the rack spacer and place on the rack spacer fastener. Apply the thread locker to the fastener. Now install the spacer and fastener through the hole in the bottom of the jaw end cover. Torque the fastener into the rack utilizing the assembly torques table for guidance. Now you will lubricate and install the O-ring seals into the counter bores in the end plates. Remember, the GRR 12 and GRR 02 options use a larger O-ring than the GRR 22. You will now align and assemble the end plates. Apply the thread locker to the fasteners retaining the end plates to the base plate and jaw guides. Install and torque the fasteners utilizing the assembly torques table for guidance. Reinstall any supply port fittings. Test to ensure proper operation. First, stop the limiting tubes with the set screws. Apply the thread locker to the set screw and torque with help from the assembly torques table. Next, stop the limiting tubes without screws. Clean the areas where the tubes will come into contact with the jaw guide, end plate, or center plate. Now apply thread locker to the contact surfaces. Push the tube into its proper position. Install the travel adjustment collars on the jaw guide using the thread locker on the fasteners during assembly. With the fasteners loosely tightened, move the collars to their proper position and torque according to the assembly torques table. Move the jaws to the full open position. Insert the O-ring seal into the shallow counterbore of the base plate. Looking at the protruding shaft of the sensor, rotate the shaft clockwise until the rotation stops. Now, visually align the counterbores in the base plate and the matching notches in the sensor or hexes. For the SPP99, place the end of the sensor shaft against the O-ring coupling in the pinion and insert the jaw position sensor into the base plate. Remember that initial resistance will be felt until the sensor shaft completely penetrates the coupling O-ring, allowing the sensor to easily slide into the large counterbore of the base plate. For the STT99, insert the spring into the hex cutout in the pinion, and insert the jaw position sensor hex sleeve into the hex cutout. You may need to rotate the shaft to fit into the whole hex. Only rotate as much as needed to fit into the hole. Apply the thread locker to the sensor cover fasteners and install and torque according to the assembly torques table. Make sure to cycle the gripper a minimum of 10 times to ensure the offset voltage output.